laughing all the while at me curious style to send your heart a bubbling. Ask me was I hired, where desire acquired till I was almost tired of the rocky road to Dublin 1 to 3 from 5. Put the hair and turn out the rocky road and all the way to Dublin back to Lollygag.
Good morning, friends. It's Jim McCarthy with American Vapor Manufacturers, joined as always by Joe Gitchell from Pinion Associates. Welcome back to Shaping Vaping, our podcast on nicotine and THR policy. And although I've started with an Irish drinking and fighting song, Joe, I want to show you the mantra that I'm going to try to channel today. When I breathe in, I relax. When I breathe out, I smile. And I'm going to try.
That's beautiful.
I don't know how long that's going. You might want to start a timer. We'll see how long that lasts, because today we're going to be talking about press coverage of the FDA guidance. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Europe, the new EU declaration from their big tobacco control conference. We're going to talk a little bit about the colloquies that I've had in the last few days through AVM with former Surgeon General Jerome Adams.
Oh, an important correction of a correction.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, I miscorrected you. Because you did correctly note him as the former Surgeon General. So I apologize for thinking you were wrong.
Okay, noted. Never let it be said we don't air corrections. And we will talk a little bit also about sort of the direction. I would call it a vibe check, the vibe shift. In our preview, I described it as the Bloomberg Blitzkrieg, but it seems apparent to me from my Kremlinology that the forces of tobacco control, particularly those under the Bloomberg umbrella, which is to say all of them, are on an all-out, full offensive in light of the FDA news. I've never seen them this active and coordinated before in many years of studying it. I'll put it that way.
So, in the vein of Kremlinology, I do think it's still important to look to areas of difference in the health NGO community, and their Truth Initiative would be an example of an entity that is not beholden to Bloomberg. They have their own money. And two, they have a different posture on these developments that may not be as different as we might wish, but is still meaningfully different.
Well, let's talk about that too, because there was an interesting article in an op-ed in the Washington Post yesterday from the odious Leana Wen. And
it's not odious.
What, help me out. What adjective? Give me an adjective so our listeners can understand.
So I've met her once very briefly, but this is not this is a person who is extremely capable, extremely competent. And I would argue that were she to get more curious about this topic and expand the people she's willing to listen to, the reading she would do, that her thinking could and should evolve. Now, that hasn't been tested, but
did you read this piece, Joe?
I read that. I
we
do.
Talking about the same person?
So, Jim, I think we know that's 5 minutes before the Thich Nhat Hanh, your solemn meditation.
I haven't raised my voice. Blood pressure level's still okay.
So you can say an odious person while smiling. Okay, fair enough. I don't think that's consistent with the point. I don't think Thich Nhat Hanh is enabling you, giving you tools to declare more people odious.
Well, you know what I'll do is for next week's show, I'll put a pin in this. Speaking of like following up on our corrections, I'll put a pin in this and I'll go back and find for you. You may recall about 7, 8, maybe 10 years ago, there was a lot of coverage in the Washington Post, the paper she writes for now, about how she, Leana Wen, was run out of Planned Parenthood for being such an abrasive, obnoxious, authoritarian bully.
We contain multitudes.
I'll find some adjectives from that piece, because let me tell you something. Planned Parenthood isn't exactly like a soft and cuddly organization. Okay. If you're too obnoxious for Planned Parenthood, you're up there.
So, hey, we all are works in progress, but those were funny stories. And then I can't resist throwing out the accounts of staff of Senator Klobuchar and the eating the salad with the comb.
Was she the one who's the one that threw the stapler at the staff?
And the like at some state fair and it's 99 degrees. She was like, I would give both of you for a bottle of water right now. It's such a good quote.
All right. Well, if I'm doing the mantra, Joe, I've got a T-shirt here that Grim Green is trying to crowdsource, and I want to see if you would be willing to wear this shirt if it gets made.
I would wear that shirt.
Right? Pretty good. It's modeled off the great Scott Lincecum T-shirt about tariffs. So those are our guiding lights for the show. But let's start, if we could, with little coverage on the new FDA guidance. And there were several articles about this, but the first one I want to pull up is from the Associated Press, whose reporter Matt Perrone, in my opinion, has been one of the single worst, most chronically slanted journalists on this beat. This guy has done more to mislead Americans about what's happening in nicotine policy than probably any other journalist, and that's a high bar. But notice the piece is all about how, according to their reporting, the senior officials at Center for Tobacco Products, Joe, were unaware, blindsided, it says, by the new guidance. Of course, he frames it in lurid terms. Will allow companies to launch nicotine-based products before they've been fully vetted by regulators.
But that's, as best we can tell, that is actually true.
Joe, do I need to pull up the Wizard of Oz clip? Do you want to see the Wizard of Oz again?
No, I'm sorry for interrupting. Allow it. Please continue.
This is a news organization. Okay, it's one thing to shade the truth in that way in a barroom conversation. Let's say these guys are held to standards of accuracy, and that is a pejorative framing. He knows full well it's literally accurate, but it's also literally accurate to say that a young girl in Wizard of Oz, goes on a hallucinogenic journey, a murder spree with 3 strangers. Well, it's true. Derp, derp, derp. I mean, come on. All right. I'm sorry. I'm losing my mantra. Going back to the mantra. But what really, let's talk about two aspects of this. One is the fact that they were, so blindsided. And I have to say, I took immense delight in that, Joe. I found that hilarious. I thought it was karma, to borrow another mantra-like word from our Asian spirituality. You know why? Because you know what you could call that? A surprise switcheroo. They are getting a giant heaping bowl of their own medicine, these people. And they have changed the rules on the vape industry multiple times, moved the goalpost. Still to this day, the centerpiece fact, I think, in this whole shooting match is that the FDA completely conceals their yardstick they use to adjudicate and measure these products. They say, oh, we've got the APPH standard, but no one knows what that means. That's like saying we've got a box of gold stickers. Well, okay, how do you decide who gets a sticker? And they won't tell you, and they won't say. So for these people to now complain, oh, heaven forfend, we were, something was done without our knowledge. Oh, it's a major injustice, don't you know? I mean, welcome to the party, pal. So your thoughts on that before we dive into the sourcing?
So I do agree that a central challenge to a better functioning regulated marketplace is more systematizing, ideally more quantification that would allow for an APPH determination to be made in a more explicit and transparent way. And I actually think there are a wide range of views that would be consistent with that. And I would agree that to date, CTP has not adopted that sort of approach. And I think hopefully we will get there. So I think you and I can have a conditional agreement point on that.
Well, I'll point out to listeners that you're broadcasting today from the campus of Yale University, and that's apropos because the language you use to describe it is a long-winded way, if I may suggest, of saying they're hiding the ball. They know what they know what the measurement is. You know why? Because they sit down at the table and they do it. They are concealing it. Is the word you're looking for?
Well, I'm left with no choice but to agree that in the absence of disclosing and clarifying and making explicit, then concealing is an accurate verb.
And how long have they been doing that? The whole damn time. The whole damn time. And it's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. And the sourcing, though, is what I want to zero in on next here, because this is consistent in several national articles that appeared about the guidance in New York Times, AP. We're going to look at a Reuters piece in a moment. And notice the basis of the reporting here. According to two staffers who spoke to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity to discuss confidential agency matters. Huh. Joe, listeners will recall it was only 2 weeks ago when you and I were kicking around why no FDA staffers had spoken to the press about all of these various aspects of malfeasance, that they're hiding the ball, the fatal flaw memo, the surprise switcheroo, leaving 500,000 American smokers twisting in the wind en route to their graves. And you know, if I can recap fairly, I think you were trying to persuade me that these are good and decent people with a sound moral compass that wish to do the right thing, but are struggling under, whatever bureaucratic constraints. And my view is they've got lots of options open to them to make their conscience known and to help inform the American public about what's actually going on. And they have refrained from doing it. They have opted not to do that. And one of the ways to do it is they can speak to the press. And, in our last conversation, we were thinking, well, that maybe that's difficult. Maybe the reporters don't know who to find. Maybe they are too timid to speak out. Maybe they're afraid to go find a phone booth, or how would they ever go about it? It's not as easy as you think. Guess what? It is as easy as you think, because this came out and within hours, Matt Perrone was on the phone to people who were going anonymous off the record. So I'll shut up in a moment, but notice the difference. Notice the difference. In the examples that I was pointing out, it was about the lives of ordinary Americans that were at stake, and malfeasance at the agency that was preventing them from getting products that could save their lives. Okay, and they were silent about that. But when their precious bureaucratic prerogatives are threatened, someone put out a memo without me seeing it. 5-alarm fire. I'm going to the press now. I mean, you can see right into their heart when you look at that contrast about what they really care about deep down.
It's a persuasive story. I would also remind us the appeal of the Starman approach of arguing with compassion and trying to.
Let's hear it.
Well, I think that what we could point to as an encouraging sign is that they have opened a relationship with a wire service reporter who's interested in this topic. And I think your analysis is a fair one to say they show they can when their interests are being threatened. So, but the final chapter on the regulation of non-combusted nicotine products has not been written. So I'm clinging to hope.
Well, the chapter on whether FDA staffers whose conscience is bothering them can do something about it has been written. And we know the answer now, because here they are in print doing it. So when FDA staffers have a crisis of conscience and they think that something wrong is happening at the agency that's going to hurt the American public, they have a way to speak out. And here's the proof of it. And for the last 15 years, they have never, ever, not a single time, once spoken out about the chaotic, shambolic, deeply destructive, and lethal malfeasance at that agency.
And I think I mostly understand why you would come to those characterizations and conclusions. I don't think that's the full representation of the story. This is not a simple, I mean, it could be simple. It is not a simple exercise to regulate this marketplace. And I think the events of the last several weeks make that very plain.
Well, Joe, what is simple, however, is picking up a telephone and speaking to a national journalist about how FDA is hurting the public. That actually is simple. And I'll point something else out too. I think you're jumping to a mistaken conclusion here and thinking that they just opened a relationship with Matt Perrone. Matt's known these people all along. They have a bat phone, a hotline to Matt Perrone the entire time. He didn't have to hunt these people down. He knew exactly who they were, and he knew exactly who to call, who would bitch about the HHS, Department of HHS going around them. I mean, this is all already lined up, and that's another great example of how the mindset of the bureaucrats is entirely aligned with the mindset of the national press. They share an ideology. They share it's a symbiotic relationship. Now, that may seem esoteric, but what's objectionable about it is the American public is counting on guys like Matt Perrone to hold the government accountable, and he's not doing it. He's not doing it. He's sticking up for the bureaucracy, and it's outrageous. I'm losing my mantra feels. Let's pull up a different one.
Do you want to pull up the mantra again? There we go.
Okay, I'm back at level set. My chakra has been restored. Now let's go to Reuters. Here's the Reuters write-up of the same thing. Notice their lurid headline. Big tobacco comes out on top after U.S. FDA shakeup. Honest to God. There's so many things that bother me about this. Again, let's just start with the anonymous sourcing. Again, first graph, USDA's new looser regulation of new vapes and pouches will potentially unleash hundreds more such products on the market in the coming weeks and months, according to 3 current and former Trump administration officials. In the actual piece, you'll notice it's one anonymous official, and then Zeller and Brian King are the two.
Yeah.
Are the two formers.
Yeah.
But what's really happening here, just to give a little look behind the journalism curtain and how the sausage gets made here, other news outlets like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and indeed AP all had stories out that were deeper dives and broke more news, or scoops they would call it in journalism parlance. So Reuters was on the back foot and desperate to catch up. That's why this article, I don't know if I've got the bylines, but that's why this article had 3 bylines on it. I don't know if you can see those up top.
I can, yeah.
Emma Rumney, Chris Prentice, and some other person.
Yeah, Yasmin Abulazeb or something.
Yeah, but the point is they were scrambling to catch up, and these reporters were under heavy pressure from their editors in order to get out ahead of the other outlets. So that's why they've put this lurid framing on it. And notice they praise themselves. The number of products in position to benefit has not been reported elsewhere. That's so they can go to the principal's office and say, look, this is new reporting. Derp, derp, derp. It's so pathetic. But the point is, here's another one. Another anonymous source within the agency found the integrity to speak to a national news outlet about ways in which they thought the agency was going in the wrong direction. But that, again, that only occurs when their precious little prerogatives are threatened. Oh no, staffers are getting laid off. Oh no, I didn't see the memo. 5-alarm fire. 500,000 Americans dying each year because FDA is depriving them of these products. Crickets. Back to work to pick up my GS-12 paycheck. So outrageous. But this piece did include, well, I'll pause there. I'll welcome your thoughts. That's a bit of a rant. But I mean, again, does that bother you in the same way it does me, or are you okay with that?
So I think a big part of this is just for our devoted selective listeners benefit is just to have a deeper understanding of the way policy and practice is actually made manifest at a body like the FDA. There is typically almost all of the work of the FDA is done by career staff who are not political appointees. Broader policy directions, prioritizations are expected to be made by the president's appointed leadership, but the nuts and bolts, blocking and tackling of regulating medicines, devices, those sorts of things are the almost exclusive purview of career civil servants. And I think what we're seeing here is in real time of the challenge of alignment and prioritization and messaging when you have that sort of structure, but it invokes the Winston Churchill quote, which I've already used once today, of representative democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other ones. This is probably the least worst way to do it, acknowledging that there is not a perfect way.
Well, there is a better way that we've talked about on a previous show. I'll remind you, which is, correct me if I'm mistaken, but when I asked if you could go back in time to when FDA deemed authority over vaping products and could put up a green light or a red light, you said no, red light. Given what we know now, that you would have stopped it happening. And when I asked you whether the vape market was better before FDA got involved or after, you said before. So there is a better way.
Well, obviously, I'm relying on all of the benefits of hindsight to reach these sort of conclusions, which nobody at the time had the benefit of.
All right.
But to be fair, no one. Obviously, there were voices saying this is going to wipe out what Greg Conley, Bill Godshall, 99% of the market, blah blah. But as I provoked you to put your head in your hands last week, there is still the opportunity to bring order and predictability, investability, innovation pathways to this marketplace. And I think that's very much in the long-term interest of all of the participants in this market, from people who consume these products to the manufacturers who produce them. And we could see literally mind-bogglingly huge public health benefits if that came into place.
Right. So we've got the previous system, which we could call laissez-faire. We've got the last 15 years of this.
10 years, only 20.
10 years since 2013.
2016. The final deeming rule was May of 2016.
Fine. 2016, 10 years of chaos and lethality and dysfunction. And we've got your theoretical sunlit upland. Those are the three ways that we have before us. And what I'd argue is the first way, the laissez-faire, as we both agree, was manifestly better than the last 10 years. And I'd also argue that your sunlit upland is never going to happen.
Well,
not only never, cannot as a practical
and this is where we maybe, the joke about the guy who is sent to prison, and his first night there, he's in the cell, and the lights go out, and it's quiet, and then another prisoner yells 41, and there's little ripples of laughter, and the new guy's like, what is going on? And then 77, and a little more laughter, and he musters the courage to ask his cellmate. He's like, what is going on? And his cellmate says, well, we've been here so long that rather than tell all the jokes, we've just numbered them all. And so we just give the number. So, he wants to try to, participate. So he yells 94, and it's dead silence. And his cellmate says, you got no timing.
I like it. I like it very dry. Very, very dry.
We can cut that. It's too bad it's a live show. We could cut that out if it weren't a live show.
But let me raise an important question, Joe. if you and I both agree that the public was better off under the laissez-faire years than they have been under the last 10 years of the shambolic lethality, what's your message to vape manufacturers and vape consumers to the question, how long would you like them to wait for FDA to get its act together? Is there a deadline, or is this just a free-floating, jazz odyssey?
I think you're making a fair argument that it can't be a free-floating jazz odyssey. That's not fair to anyone. But I mean, and we haven't refined this, but I do think if by the end of the year this marketplace doesn't look very different than it does now, that's a real indictment of this project.
Well, maybe therein lies, a wager for us. It's a little bit subjective. If by December 31st of this year, the vape market remains, in a chaotic, lethal, shambolic situation similar to what it is now, will Joe take up the banner of laissez-faire economics?
Well, I mean, let's not get extreme.
Oh no! Oh no! We wouldn't want to go back to something that worked. God, heaven forbid the bureaucratic prerogatives would be threatened. That's the most important thing, isn't it? Honestly. But what about the quote here? Tell us about who is Vaughan Rees of Harvard University School of Public Health.
So, and what I will do is I will add to the links afterwards. Vaughan addressed when it was called the e-cigarette summit, I think back in 2022, perhaps, and gave a very moving account.
Good.
So Vaughan is a well-regarded, thoughtful leader in this domain, and he has thoughts that are a little more kind of English in terms of there's a continuum of risk and it should be used as a tool to reduce smoking. And that's, I think,
by English you mean plain spoken.
No, but I mean, no, more the kind of policy framework that England has established to try to promote the switching of people who smoke to people who vape.
All right. Well, I was surprised to see this quote in the Reuters piece, which Reuters is, as we've documented in AVM's threads, and we'll put some in the chat, is, chronically slanted. So I was actually rather startled to see this in here. And again,
but you can still access Surprise, Jim.
Well, I look at, it's interesting. Let's touch on this, because I see this, I'm trying to do some criminology on how this is shifting. And there's a dilemma for news outlets and indeed tobacco control hardliners at the moment, because there's a major shift. For the first time, FDA has authorized flavored vaping. For the first time, FDA is, really getting serious about enforcement discretion. I think that, Reuters is right to an extent that there's going to be more products that benefit from this. I don't know whether their estimates are right or not. We could kick that around, but the point is there's a major shift. And notice too, that in all of the common colloquial conversation about this online from a lot of major Twitter influencers who have no, affiliation with this field, are all acknowledging openly, plainly, common sense, vaping is vastly safer than smoking and helps people quit. And that presents a dilemma for the press and for tobacco control, of course, because the longer they maintain their ludicrous hardline position that vaping is just as dangerous as smoking and doesn't help you quit, the more ridiculous and discredited they become. So they have to somehow repair that breach in their wall. And I that's what I see. It's not as though Emma Rumney and Chris Prentice have suddenly had a light bulb go off and understand the principles of tobacco harm reduction. What they're trying to do is cover their butt. And
is this like Mott and Bailey, or is this a different thing?
Yeah, it's similar to Mott and Bailey, where they stake a hardline position, and then when that gets overrun, they retreat back into the castle. So now, in the future, they'll be able to say, oh, well, Of course, we quoted Vaughan Rees from Harvard saying this long time ago. We aren't hardliners, people. We've known this all along. Don't be silly. It's a kind of retrenchment. And you saw that too in what Leana Wen wrote in the Washington Post.
I think it's actually Leana Wen.
Leana Wen.
Even though she has multiple vowels in her name. I think
Leana Wen. Believe me. We'll
or you could try Dr. Wen.
Yeah, we'll come back to Dr. Wen next week. Don't worry. We're gonna find a lot of adjectives about her. But I think we could both agree she's of all the people that write in the national press. She's a columnist at the Washington Post. God knows how. There's no one who's more hardline anti-vape than she is. Is that fair to say?
I don't know about the top parody claim because it is a contested title, I think. But we
won't etch it in stone. Can you think of any columnist that's more of a hardliner than her? I cannot.
It's not right off the top of my head. She is a good exemplar of folks who who disagree with us.
All right, but nevertheless, in her piece, in her column, I'm going to read you direct quotes, verbatim quotes from her own voice of how she characterized the situation. Now, these are truncated, pulled from the article, but these are things she actually wrote. Number 1, vaping helps adult smokers quit cigarettes. Number 2, quote, vaping is preferable to cigarette smoking, close quote. Number 3, quote, studies suggest vaping could work better than other nicotine replacement therapies, close quote. 4, quote, some adult smokers may reduce cigarette use in favor of vaping, close quote. And again, that is for a total hardliner, that must be like chewing glass for them. And remember, Michael Bloomberg had it in his own column too. I seized on that when I noticed it too. To my memory, that's the first time ever that Michael Bloomberg has openly, explicitly acknowledged that vaping helps people quit smoking. I mean, are you struck by that?
I do think those are important developments, and I'd love to think that it's the part of a journey of discovery that Dr. Wen may be more open to interacting with people who don't share her pre-existing beliefs. And I cling to the hope, as someone who is as smart and confident and capable as she is, that she would end up basically saying, why was I not told that New Zealand has reduced smoking dramatically in the populations that have had historically high levels? Why was I not told that the UK swap to stop is reaching, exactly the targets of most deprived, that sort of stuff? Like, there's a bigger picture here than the simplistic Manichaean narrative that is so readily available to folks. It just doesn't reflect reality as well as maybe it once did.
Well, I mean, journey of discovery is about the gentlest way you could do it. I mean, I don't know. Marco Polo was on a journey of discovery. Attila the Hun went on a journey too. Okay, but he wasn't going to. He didn't want to go tour the sights of Vienna. Okay, that wasn't the purpose. He was stomping over the landscape. These people have been depriving others, their fellow human beings, of products that can save their lives. I mean, they're on a journey. Yeah, journey of conquest. And you know what, Joe? We get back to the problem of, what they know or how cloistered they are. And I give Dr. Wen a lot more credit than I think you do. I think she does know that. I mean, let me pull up a slide, for example.
So I'm a brief aside, and I will put in. So I'm rereading the How Minds Change book by David McRaney, which I highly recommend. Yeah. And he has a whole chapter on the dress. Remember the striped dress?
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful example of how multiple humans have the exact same photons hitting their receptors in their eyes. And yet their conclusions, without uncertainty, are very different. And that process happens when we have ambiguity and our brains resolve it effortlessly and rapidly.
Joe, I know you're fascinated by that aspect of human cognition and apprehension.
Yes.
But the example you're pointing out is a canard, because in the blue dress example, it was debatable. Okay, it was debatable. People looked at it.
There was ambiguity. Fair enough.
Right, but when we talk about the guy, the flat Earth Society, who were taking
Satan's fireball.
Yeah, taken to Antarctica so they could see that the sun never set, and then they declared it was Satan's fireball. I mean, they're receiving information and their photons in a different way, but the rest of us can look at that and say these people are out of their minds. Okay, well, the rest of us can say these people should never be in charge of a bureaucracy or the lives of other people or anything above the level of making a tuna sandwich. The problem with your example is you're happy to let those people drive the car while they're still sorting out their confusion and their manias. Whereas I think they need to be in a straitjacket till they figure it out.
Yeah. We don't have the same model operating in our heads.
Yeah. When you go to the Yale Men's Grill tonight, one of your buddies gets overserved, you're just gonna say, "Well, he just processes vodka different than I do. Here's the car keys." Or do you think maybe you'll give him a ride home? I mean, look, here's a chart from the EU conference. Let's get back to the serious analysis. Okay, you say they're not aware of what happens in these other countries, okay? This is the flagship tobacco control conference in Europe that just took place, all right? And notice, this is the chart of how they regard which countries are closest to the smoke-free utopia that they.
Well, I think this is their tobacco industry influence assessment. So how much is policymaking in any of these nations influenced by industry? I think that's what this is arguing.
Let's put a fine point on this. This is called the tobacco control scale.
I think Martin Cullup had shared this, and I think it was the industry influence one, but maybe it's their overall tobacco control scorecard, like how their policy framework aligns with the Empower program of evidence-based elements.
Right. It's how well it aligns with their policy prescriptions.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry I'm making a habit of correcting you for being right. So I definitely need to improve that.
But the point here that Martin was making, and that I'll emphasize too, is Sweden, which has the fewest smokers of any of these countries, is nevertheless only 47 out of 100 in their scale, more than halfway down the chart.
Yeah, failing grade.
So, I mean, they're well aware of what all these people who made this chart are well aware of what the smoking rates are in Sweden.
So, oh
no, not even halfway through, Joe.
I do think I would urge you to leave a little more space to consider that these people, especially Dr. Wen, her scope is very broad. She does not spend every waking moment thinking about this stuff. And she's reliant upon trusted sources to explain and simplify and synthesize for her. And I can assure you, and I'll put in my latest Substack where I talk about the dueling pianos, commentaries, and stuff like that. There is ample content available, credible, referenced to support the views of the people who see things differently. It is not an open and shut reality for these people.
Joe, Washington Post readers don't know that Dr. Wen is confused and has incomplete understanding. Her article is presented to them as an authoritative source, a credentialed medical professional. And you know what else? It's not the first time she's written about it. She's done more than 24 articles. So spare me the notion that she's just new to the field. Just get.
Jim, that is not what I said.
You said her knowledge was incomplete and said that she's still learning.
No. What I said was she covers a lot of topics that are complicated and important. and that she does not devote every waking minute to thinking about nicotine science and policy. As such, she relies upon sources to give her their take on things. My plea is that she would open up the aperture to get more complicated input to understand what has happened in New Zealand, what has happened in Japan, what has happened in
Sweden.
Sweden, what is happening in the US actually. And let's look at what smoking rates are. Let's look at historical trend. I mean, the challenge is that so much of the coverage reports a simple, powerful narrative that worked when this was a market dominated by cigarettes. But it is not an accurate representation now.
All right, let's not belabor that. Let's not over belabor.
I think we should over belabor. I think.
Okay.
You're like, let's not over belabor it while you're making good points, Joe.
I'll have a Dr. Wen pinata party all afternoon if you'd like. Okay, my opinion of her is rock bottom. Joe, I don't know. She deserves no benefit of the doubt. There's a column on the op-ed page of the Washington Post. Either it's well informed and understood and rigorously presented, or it's crap on toast. I do not want to. She gets no latitude from me about whether she's still finding out if her sources are trustworthy. This is the 29th column she's done on the subject. We're long past that. And I guess, but I want to flag something that was interesting in the piece that she quoted Yolanda Richardson, the head of Tobacco Free Kids. And she said something really curious. I don't have a slide of the card, so I'm going to paraphrase it. But she said, FDA has already approved
45
of these products.
Why do we need more?
Why do we need more? They've already approved 45. Why do we need more?
That was very interesting.
Help me understand, before lest I assign motives. Help me understand what the rationale she's expressing there.
So I noted that with interest as well, because I hadn't heard it expressed quite that way before. And I think that is an attempt to establish a position in the face of an enforcement discretion policy, which may see the introduction of a host of new products. And the likelihood, hope for likelihood that there will be more marketing granted orders. And they're taking a position of America can have any color car that it wants as long as it's black. I think it's interesting that they feel they have to take that position. And I hope that they interact with reporters that say, do you have a basis for that?
What is the basis for it? What's your intuition?
Oh, my intuition is that they probably feel they need to say something in that vein, and that is something that can be said. I don't know that its connection to the reality of the marketplace is particularly robust.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I guess I'll tell you how it struck me. We must remember that nearly all of these people, the career people at the FDA, the tobacco control NGO people, the foundation people, these are folks that very few of them who've ever worked in the private sector or had to meet a payroll or worked in commercial industry or taken part in the market. Some, yes, not the vast prevailing majority, not. And Yolanda Richardson, no. And the point is they have this kind of leftist outlook about how markets work and about how commercial industry works. And from her Crayola perspective, oh, you already got 45, how many do you really need? This is the most naive dorm room understanding of how markets actually work. And I think it's coming from a place of real economic ignorance. But you're right, a flailing attempt to try to cling on to the regime they had low 6 months ago.
Well, and it reflects also the continued rejection of the continuum risk as a basis for policy, not wanting to see the market evolve into a regulated. And that's where I think a distinction, even though Kathy Crosby made that point essentially in her LinkedIn post in response to the Washington Post editorial back in March, where she said it's unlikely that more authorizations will address the illicit market without any further evidence or argument to support that contention.
Well, your friend Mitch Zeller had an interesting quote too in one of these articles. He's been on Dial-A-Quote. Mitch must be having the time of his life. His phone's ringing off the hook. He must be just bouncing in his chair with all the ink he's getting. But he had an interesting quote, which was he said the new enforcement guidance is not fair. It's unfair to the companies that already got marketing granting orders because they went through this arduous process and they did all the hard work and they met the bar. And now all these others are being let in without the same rigor. He noted. I set an Olympic record with how far I spit my coffee, that Mitch is worried about what's fair to manufacturers. I mean, absolutely. It just the gall, the absolute depth of nerve to say something like that. But it was striking because it's of a piece with what you're describing. They're like, okay, now we've got to let them in. Now, how are we gonna maintain a grip on their throats?
Well, and I appreciate that this is really your warm-up period before you embrace the Star Manning approach to arguing with compassion. I know
Mitch was really worried about how nicotine manufacturers are being treated. Really? We're supposed to take that seriously?
Oh, I would
Jack the Ripper here to talk about medical devices.
I know this is asking a lot of you, but I'm asking you to hold space for the fact that there are people who, I'm not the only one who still dreams of that sunlit upland of a regulated marketplace that actually helps consumers, not hinders what they're trying to do. And that is possible. We were
there. We were in that sunlit upland. And you know who wasn't there? Is Mitch Zeller. That's when the sun was shining. That's when products were innovated. That's when people were switching and taking their own destinies into their own hands. That's when flavors began to proliferate. That's when consumers were helping one another in what Dr. Michael Siegel calls smoking cessation clinics. We were in that sunlit upland. And you know who wasn't there? Mitch, that's the world I want to return to, where his obscurity and impotence is the default.
Well, so you've made your position clear.
That wasn't Star Manning. I know. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. And one last thing to flag. That was not Star Manning. So one last thing to flag while we're on this, which is there was actually a good piece, Joe. Let it never be said Jim McCarthy doesn't praise reporters on the nicotine. Nyah Phengsitthy from, of all places, Bloomberg News, did a piece here, which we did a thread on at AVM. We'll put back in the chat. And she actually spoke to vape manufacturers, including myself as spokesman for AVM. And she spoke to friend of the show, Nick Green, host of the Grim Green podcast, who's done more to help ordinary Americans quit smoking than anybody else I could name. And certainly, well, I'll just leave it at that. And she went out of her way to quote all these people and talk about how the vape tobacco harm reduction community, vape manufacturers and consumers regard the guidance, something you'll find absent in every other news outlet, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, AP, Washington Post, on and on and on. You can look long and far and you won't find a syllable. You won't find a single quote from an ordinary American who's quit smoking with vaping, and you won't find a word about how vape manufacturers and small vape, independent vape businesses regard the market. So I was really, really pleased by that. Your thoughts?
No, I have a lot of time for Nyah and glad that her editor is allowing her the opportunity to do that work.
For now.
Well, recall our commitment from last week to engage more with the live comments that we were receiving. And Skip is giving us a nudge to call out World Vape Day.
Oh, right. Please tell us.
Well, we'll put a link in to Skip's stuff because there's cool action going on the social medias with, as you say, the people who have been able to stop smoking, to switch to non-combustible products, and talking about the benefits that they've realized there. And it's a play. May 31st for 30 years or so has been World No Tobacco Day.
Right.
And so World Vape Day is a companion piece that actually should be more of a companion piece when people realize that the shared truth of the continuum of risk is the basis for regulation and policy.
Good. Well, we've put a link to some of the promo for that in AVM's Twitter this morning, and we'll continue to do that in the next couple days as World Vape Day approaches. And I also want to point out, Joe, an example where I did try, I don't know if I can call this star manning, but I tried to engage with former Surgeon General Jerome Adams. Have you had a chance to look at the dialogue that I had with him?
Well, that was not your first round. This is your second round.
This one, let me preface for viewers. We had a first tangle about 2 weeks ago, and then he came back and did a tweet a few days ago saying it was keyed to the New York Times article that Reynolds lobbyists had made a huge donation, a $5 million donation to Trump-related PACs, and then, almost instantly, the new guidance was put in motion. And in the eyes of the New York Times and others, that's naked corruption, et cetera. And Adams flagged that article and said, normally, vape advocates are all up in my thread, beefing with me about vaping. But now that this New York Times article has appeared, they've got nothing to say. And so AVM responded and said, ahem, sir, we've been trying to dialogue with you for 3 years, and I've gotten nothing but radio silence. What are you talking about? But I guess, and I'll put a link to this thread in the chat. But again, Joe, I beg you to notice, I've tried very hard here in the colloquy to be straightforward, adjective-free, engaging, and to steer clear of ad hominem. And that's not what we got in reply. You can see here he's, accusing us of believing in ends justify the means, being in bed with Reynolds American, hell-bent to hurt kids, and that the New York Times article somehow, as he puts it, quote, undercuts all your arguments. So, I mean, the really crazy part is that we even quoted back to him a speech that he'd given some years ago at Cato Institute at the bottom here, in which he says, the fact is that public health professionals, myself included, often lecture others about what they should be doing without actually taking the time to ask people about their priorities and concerns. Okay. But when we do talk about our priorities and concerns, we get accused of being child poisoners. So maybe that's part of why, Dr. Adams. Again, just more of the same here, more of the same. So I don't know. What do you make of that? Do we any praise for AVM for our gentle attempt at Guzmanian dialogue?
Yes, and as I would not take its apparent lack of traction with Dr. Adams as anything but that this is still we have a long way to go. But
I say it's entirely characteristic of the tobacco control's attitude toward you, me, and everyone else in the THR movement. The only difference is that he actually engages. Most of them simply don't respond and malign us from afar. But at least he's disparaging us to our face. But his attitude is completely consistent with everyone in tobacco control.
Well, again, one, he does get credit for engaging. That's not nothing at all. And two, I would remind us that so much of this is easy to create the explanations, the stories, the beliefs when we're keyboard warring versus actually talking to someone in person.
Well, Joe,
and that's not easy to do. And yes, it would be great if he read How to Disagree Better or How Minds Change and was committed to embracing those approaches to bridging differences. But it's, at least to your point, at least he's willing to wrestle.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I could have used your help in that thread with some links to those books and some gentle encouragement to Dr. Adams while he was, bashing us with the Louisville Slugger. I mean, I think that's one of the real difficulties in the THR space is that we spend a lot of time and energy tone policing one another about how to be gentle and reach out more, in a more civil way and engage in a constructive fashion. And meanwhile, people on the other side are denouncing you as a colonialist, racist, destroyer of worlds, but who's become death, and calling me a poisoner of children. And you've met Dr. Adams. You have a personal relationship with him. Did you feel like jumping into that thread and saying, tap your brakes, Doc?
So, and again, I've not been as active on the social medias of late as I would like to be. So that's an opportunity. But I'm not giving up on anybody until I get the Heisman Trophy award from folks. So,
well, maybe next time around when I'm turning off the lights and locking the door in the Irish pub, I'll ping you a DM and you can maybe jump
I can slink out the back before.
Well, I need you in that room, Joe, because what happens left of as Skip and Ariel are pointing out in the chat here, left to my own devices, I'm gonna pick up my shillelagh.
But Thich Nhat Hanh has the lesson there for you.
Joe,
about...
I tried the Thich Nhat Hanh method.
You did try.
With Dr. Adams. Okay, I tried that consistently. All right, and got nowhere. And I guess I want to close a little bit with praise for friend of the show Nick Green for speaking to Nyah at Bloomberg. Nick shares my deep skepticism and antipathy for the national news media and the way that they've betrayed their duty to the public. And so, one of the real dilemmas I've had at AVM, doing PR for AVM, is trying to persuade ordinary vapors and especially vape retailers to speak with the national press because they correctly regard these people as untrustworthy and, malicious and, that they have ulterior motives. And to his immense credit and integrity, Nick spoke to her, and I vouched for her and said, she'll treat you fairly, and so she did. And Nick had a great quote about how adults use flavors to quit cigarettes, and that was the first time I can recall in national ink that's happened. So much praise to Nick. But the reason I point that out, Joe, well, there's one last thing I want to flag, if you'll indulge me a moment, because I want to get back to the close on what we talk about. How ordinary Americans, and we spend a lot of time talking about all these various, mandarins.
Fancy. Yes, the mandarins. That's good.
Yeah, and not enough talking about what ordinary people think of it. And there was a piece this week in the Journal of Business Ethics. Never let it be said I don't do my homework, Joe, on the literature. There was a piece this week, and it's all about the graphic health warnings on cigarette tobacco products, which of course tobacco control loves. No image is too lurid, no picture too ghastly, no health harm too offensive for them to refrain from showing on the cigarette pack. But what this study was about is how many of the packaging on vape products lacks those kinds of images. Okay, and so they studied public attitudes of public attitudes toward vaping and cigarette products when vaping doesn't have the lurid image and the tobacco product does. And what they conclude is, obviously, when consumers see that tobacco has the image and vaping doesn't, the public thinks, well, the vaping might be safer. And so what do these guys suggest we do? Let's read it out. This is an absolute platonic ideal of academic jargon. These results support warning congruence as an ethically preferable regulatory design that better preserves the conditions for informed comparative judgment and carry implications for ethically responsible policy design, corporate conduct, and consumer welfare, blah, 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 blah. The point is, they want the lurid, ghastly images on vape packaging also. even though, Joe, stay with me here, even though it's not true. It's not true. The images they're showing are not caused by vaping. And these people in the Journal of Business Ethics, I repeat, are saying having those graphic labels on both vaping and tobacco is ethically preferable. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm embarrassed. I saw some coverage of this. I haven't read it. I see. So I need to read the paper and really try to understand how they framed up the discussion around the continuum of risk and whether that's real or not. This does not align very tightly with my desires for how to address the widespread misperceptions about relative risk and to get people who smoke to switch to non-combustible products.
And this gets us back to I think the contrast between the way academia and elites talk about this and the way that ordinary people talk about it. I mean, let me cut to the chase with a simple ethical question. Is it ever okay? Is it ever ethically acceptable for public health to intentionally lie to the public?
Well,
even to that?
Even I can agree with you on that one. And I think it's counter to their long-term objectives of being trusted sources for health information.
So morally wrong and practically wrong is what you're saying. Wrong in two respects.
Bigly wrong. Yeah.
Bigly wrong. And you've been in public health for a long time, Joe. Would you agree that that is a bedrock principle of public health communications?
Should be.
It's in the ethics guidelines of every major public health entity. And yet here these guys are, much like Kathy Crosby, who you mentioned before, who think it's somehow morally justified to lie to the public about vaping products. It is absolutely horrendous. Horrendous. And I guess the point I'm making is all this, they dress it up in all this jargon in their credentials. It's so obnoxious. And when ordinary people see that, Joe, okay, like we can go to the SR&T conference and we can talk in the pub peer comments and people can speak in this kind of, arcane, dressed up jargon. But do you know what ordinary vapors conclude when they see credentialed academics, people that are in control of the levers, the commanding heights of our society speak in this way? It's radicalizing, Joe, It's radicalizing. It's like
that cool. I did see that cool clip of that little dachshund doing the the course, and it was like become ungovernable. It just kept knocking over the cones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know a lot of people make fun of me for being like a wingnut wackadoodle libertarian who thinks, wants to live the all freedom lifestyle. But, I'm sorry to tell you, that's a bedrock value of American society. My fellow Americans mostly agree with that. And I want to show you one last clip. We'll close with the last clip from Nick, because Nick is an, ordinary vapor. He's not an academic. Okay. He doesn't work for an NGO. Nick's a regular guy who does YouTube videos helping fellow Americans quit smoking. He ought to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom if I had my way. But the point is, he sees this stuff and he looks at this, and so do his listeners. If you look in the sidebar comments of his chat, you will see white hot phosphorescent rage at all of these people, the academics, tobacco control people, the FDA. And Nick was not a political person. Okay. Nick was kind of neutral. He, by his own lights, he spoke about this on his last show. He just sort of, let it drift past. He was like a leaf in the stream. Doesn't really rah-rah for either side, was just going about his daily life, as most Americans want to do, in pursuit of their happiness. But after he started reading this stuff, and after he saw what FDA is doing in this one little silo, I want to play for you a clip of what happens to ordinary Americans when they're exposed to that level of mendacity and manipulation.
Morning, and forgive me for speaking out of turn here, but your government has no right to know what you are doing, and you have every right to know what your government is doing. That's why they're called public servants, and we're called private citizens. I don't know when or how this relationship became inverted, but now it seems like the government gets to hide behind secrets and classified information and redactions, while at the same exact time demanding full transparency into your finances and your communications and your movements. A society where the ruling class gets to sit in privacy while the citizens are being surveilled, I think is the actual definition of tyranny.
Not an esoteric view, Joe. I repeat, you watch Nick's live stream, you'll see in the sidebar chat absolute rage along those exact same lines. And that gets back to what we talked to at the beginning of the show. The yardstick that FDA is using to adjudicate whether these products can be authorized for the market is entirely concealed from public view. We know nothing about how it was constructed, nothing about how it was changed or why or when. Zero transparency on how it's actually used. Even this new guidance that TFK is claiming, oh no, it's going to open the floodgates. We don't even know how an application is, on what basis is it accepted for scientific review. It's completely concealed. And when ordinary people whose lives depend on it, whose freedom is being encroached, see that, they begin to take on the attitude that Nick is describing there, which I wholeheartedly endorse. And I think you'd agree with too.
No, that's powerful message to the people who would listen.
Yeah, well, I hope Mitch Zeller was listening, and I hope that Brian King was listening, and Yolanda Richardson and Dr. Wen. That's who he's talking about. Those are the people he's talking about. I mean, if you think my Roget's thesaurus adjectives like odious are a little too far over the line, read the comment thread in Nick Green's. If you want to see what the mob looks like out there with the pitchforks and the torches, believe me, you're gonna wish you had Jim McCarthy's delicate adjectives. Thank you for joining us. I'm trying to think. We have so much that we have left on the cutting room floor again. Next week, I want to talk more about the EU declaration, which is just, again, did you see this, Joe?
Well, this is the I think the European Conference on Tobacco Health was last week, and that was those were their resolutions.
Yeah, and they had it at the bottom of their slide deck, made possible by Bloomberg Philanthropies. Hasten to add. But this is what's interesting about this, and we'll talk about this next time. Is this is the full menu wish list. This is their, when Michael Bloomberg and his cronies sit down at the tobacco control banquet table, this is their full wish list. So we'll dive into that next time. And am I forgetting anything else? Anything else you feel we overlooked?
No, that was I'm a little exhausted. So it was a good show.
Okay, Joe. Well, I hope you get to play golf at the beautiful Gilham.
Not going to get to play, but I'm going back to I will run back to the Yale Innovation Summit in my Free the Inquiry T-shirt.
Go play 18, Joe. You'll be much better off. It'll be better for your mental health.
I am the most fortunate human people will ever encounter. So to have that as things that tempt me is I'm grateful. So,
all right. Well, perhaps show some people at the Yale Innovation Summit Nick Green's video and see if that helps. See if that helps bring them closer to the.
Very good.
You can get no more. You can get no more cloistered and elite, and at the command. There's no commanding height in our society higher than the Yale University Innovation Summit. So they need to hear it. All right, this has been Jim Green. Joe, thank you for your forbearance as always. I treasure our dialogues, and thank you for watching, friends. We'll be back next week with another edition of Shaping Vape. This is Jim McCarthy for AVM.
Thank you, Jim.